The rain fell in long quiet sheets along the highway as night settled over the small roadside diner. The building stood alone between miles of dark road and open fields. Inside the diner the lights were warm and steady, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Mara moved slowly behind the counter as she cleaned the last tables of the evening. Her feet ached from a long shift and her thoughts drifted toward home and sleep. Mara had worked at the diner for 3 years and knew the rhythm of nights like this. Late evenings were usually calm with only truck drivers and travelers stopping for warmth. She liked these hours because they felt honest and still. The world outside faded and people showed their real faces. She had learned that quiet places often held heavy stories. The door opened with a low creak and cold air rushed inside. A tall man stepped in carrying the weight of the road on his shoulders. He wore a black leather jacket soaked from the rain and heavy boots that echoed against the floor. His helmet hung loosely in one hand. Without looking around he walked to the far booth and sat down slowly. Mara noticed him right away. Not because he looked dangerous but because something about him felt broken. He did not order food or look at the menu. He simply sat there with his elbows on the table and his head lowered. When Mara glanced again she saw his shoulders shake slightly. The man was crying and trying hard to hide it. Most people avoided bikers when they came through town. They carried loud engines and louder reputations. Mara had seen many of them over the years and learned to keep her distance. But this man felt different. His pain filled the room quietly like the rain outside. It pulled at her heart in a way she could not ignore. She stood still for a moment, debating with herself. Life had taught her to be careful. Kindness sometimes invited trouble. Still she remembered the nights when she herself had wished someone would notice her pain. She poured a cup of coffee and walked toward the booth. When she reached the table she placed the cup down gently. She told him the coffee was on the house and wished him a warm night. Her voice was calm and respectful. The man looked up slowly and met her eyes. His face was rough and lined with age and experience, but his eyes held deep sadness. He thanked her in a low voice and wrapped his hands around the cup. His hands were large and scarred and trembled slightly. He stared into the coffee as if the steam carried memories he could not escape. Mara stayed standing for a moment, unsure of what to say next. She asked if he was all right. The question was simple, but it seemed to open something inside him. His jaw tightened and he looked away toward the window where rain streaked down the glass. Silence stretched between them, heavy and real. After a long pause he spoke. He said he had lost someone important. He said the road had never felt so empty. He said strength did not stop pain from finding its way back. His words came slowly, like each one cost him something. Mara listened without interrupting. She had learned that listening was sometimes the greatest gift. She did not ask for details and did not push him to explain more. She let him speak at his own pace. The diner felt smaller as the storm grew louder outside. The man finally told her his name was Logan. Just Logan. Nothing else followed it. Mara nodded and introduced herself. Their names hung between them like a quiet agreement. For a moment they were simply two strangers sharing space and honesty. Logan told her he had just come from a long ride. He said he did not know where he was headed next. The road had always been his escape, but tonight it felt endless. He admitted that stopping at the diner was not part of any plan. Something had simply pulled him off the highway. Mara understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. She had stayed in this town because leaving felt too hard. Dreams sometimes felt safer when left untouched. She told him the diner stayed open late and he was welcome to sit as long as he needed. Her words were simple but meant more than she realized. Logan nodded and took a slow sip of coffee. The warmth seemed to steady him. He told her that most people saw his jacket before they saw him. They judged before listening. Tonight he needed someone to see him as human. Mara felt her chest tighten at his honesty. Outside the storm began to ease, but inside the weight of the moment remained. The neon sign buzzed softly above the counter. The world beyond the diner felt far away. Time moved differently in shared silence. Mara returned to her work but kept an eye on Logan. She noticed the way he stared at the door, as if expecting someone who would never arrive. She wondered what kind of life led a man like him to tears in a quiet diner. She had no idea that his pain came from a world filled with loyalty and fear. Logan finished his coffee and rested his hands on the table. He closed his eyes briefly as if gathering himself. When he opened them again there was resolve mixed with sorrow. He did not know why he had spoken to a stranger. He only knew that it had helped. Mara sensed that this moment mattered. She did not know how or why. She only knew that kindness had crossed paths with something powerful. Helping him felt right even if it carried unknown risks. Some nights changed lives without warning. Neither of them realized that this quiet meeting would ripple far beyond the diner walls. Mara did not know the meaning behind the patches on his jacket. Logan did not know how much her compassion would stay with him. The rain finally stopped, but the story had only begun. Morning light crept slowly through the diner windows as the night finally loosened its grip. The rain had washed the road clean and left the air sharp and cold. Mara stood behind the counter pouring fresh coffee as the early hours brought a few tired travelers inside. Her mind kept drifting back to the biker from the night before and the quiet heaviness he carried. Logan had stayed until near dawn. He barely spoke after their last exchange and left quietly without drawing attention. Before he walked out he nodded once at Mara with a look that felt like gratitude and goodbye mixed together. She watched him ride away until the sound of his bike faded into the open road. All day long she replayed the night in her head. Something about Logan felt unfinished. He had shared just enough to leave questions hanging in the air. Mara told herself it was foolish to think about a stranger, but she could not shake the feeling that their meeting mattered. That evening the diner grew busy again. Trucks lined the lot and voices filled the room. Mara worked fast-moving between tables and orders. Just as the rush slowed, the door opened once more and several bikers stepped inside. Their jackets were dark and worn and their presence shifted the mood instantly. Conversation dropped to a low murmur. People watched carefully from the corners of their eyes. The bikers moved with confidence and chose a large booth near the center. Mara felt a tightness in her chest as she noticed the familiar leather and symbols. She wondered if Logan rode with men like these. One of the bikers caught her eye and gave a polite nod. His voice was calm when he ordered coffee and food for the group. They were loud but respectful and thanked her when she brought their meals. Mara realized her fear had been built more from stories than experience. As she turned away she heard a familiar voice speak her name. She froze and looked back. Logan stood near the door, helmet tucked under his arm. He looked different now. His posture was straight and his presence filled the room quietly. The sadness was still there, but it no longer bent him. He walked toward the counter and greeted her like an old friend. The bikers at the booth watched him closely with clear respect. One of them stood briefly as Logan approached, then sat back down without a word. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Mara felt her pulse quicken. She realized Logan was not just another rider. He ordered coffee and leaned against the counter speaking softly. He told her he had returned because he wanted to thank her properly. He said her kindness had reached him when nothing else could. She smiled, unsure how to respond. She told him she was just doing her job. Logan shook his head gently and said it was more than that. He said not many people looked past the jacket to see the man underneath. As they spoke, the bikers finished eating and prepared to leave. Each one nodded to Logan with quiet loyalty. One called him captain without thinking. The word hung in the air like a sudden wind. Mara felt her breath catch. She finally understood the weight Logan carried. He noticed her reaction and quickly explained. He said titles did not matter here. He was simply a man on the road trying to carry his responsibilities. He admitted that his world was built on loyalty and rules and brotherhood. It demanded strength at all times. Grief was not something easily shared. The night before had broken through walls he had kept for years. Mara listened again just as she had before. She realized that leadership did not protect a person from pain. Sometimes it made loneliness deeper. Logan said he would be leaving town soon and did not know when he would return. Before he left, he placed something on the counter. It was a small metal pin worn smooth with age. He told her it was not a promise or a warning. It was a thank you. A sign that she would always be treated with respect by those who knew him. Mara hesitated, then accepted it. She understood the trust behind the gesture. Logan smiled once more and walked out into the fading light. His bike roared to life and the group followed him onto the road. As the sound disappeared, Mara held the pin in her hand, feeling its weight. She did not know what the future held. She only knew that a simple act of kindness had connected two very different worlds. The diner returned to its usual rhythm, but Mara felt changed. She looked out at the road with new eyes. Some meetings were brief but left marks that never faded. And somewhere down the highway, Logan carried her compassion with him as armor stronger than leather. Days passed after Logan left town, and life at the diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm for Mara. She served coffee, wiped counters, and greeted strangers with the same calm smile. Yet something inside her had shifted quietly. The road outside no longer felt empty to her. It felt connected to something larger and unseen. She often found herself looking at passing bikes, wondering if Logan was among them. The pin he gave her stayed tucked safely in her apron pocket every shift. It felt like a small anchor reminding her that kindness carried weight. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the sky in soft orange light, a sudden noise broke the calm. Several bikes rolled into the parking lot, kicking up dust and drawing attention. Customers inside stiffened and glanced toward the windows. Mara felt a familiar tension but stayed steady. She stepped forward, ready to do her job like always. The door opened and a few bikers walked in slower than expected. Their faces were serious and focused, not loud or careless. One of them approached the counter and asked politely if she was Mara. Her heart skipped, but she nodded. The man said Logan had sent them. He said there was no danger, only a message. The room felt quiet as every ear listened. He told her Logan had been called away suddenly to handle a matter far from town. On the way, something had gone wrong with another group that did not respect rules or boundaries. Logan had stepped in to calm the situation before it turned ugly. In doing so, he took the burden on himself to protect others. The man said Logan was safe but worn down. Mara listened carefully, trying to keep her face calm. She had never been part of this world, yet it was brushing against her life again. She asked if Logan needed help. The biker shook his head gently and said Logan only wanted her to know he was thinking of her kindness. He said strength came in many forms and Logan carried hers with him. Before leaving, the biker placed a folded note on the counter. He said Logan wrote it during a quiet moment on the road. Mara waited until they left before opening it. The paper was creased and smelled faintly of oil and wind. The words were simple and honest. Logan wrote that leadership meant standing tall even when the ground felt unstable. He wrote that the night in the diner reminded him that being human was not weakness. He thanked her for seeing him without fear or expectation. He said he hoped she would keep choosing compassion even when it felt risky. Mara folded the note slowly and held it close. She felt pride mixed with worry. She understood now that Logan walked a path filled with responsibility and constant watchfulness. She also understood that she could not step fully into that world. Their connection lived in moments, not promises. The following weeks tested her resolve. Rumors drifted through town about bikers and trouble far away. Some customers spoke with fear and judgment. Mara stayed quiet, remembering the man behind the jacket. She defended no one and attacked no one. She simply carried her own truth. One late night, as the diner emptied again, the door opened softly. Mara looked up, expecting another traveler. Instead, she saw Logan standing there alone. His jacket was dusty and his face tired, but his eyes were clear. Relief washed over her before she could stop it. He sat at the counter and she poured him coffee without a word. Silence settled comfortably between them. Logan said the road had been long and heavy. He said leadership often meant choosing the hardest option quietly. He admitted that he came back because the diner felt like a place where he could breathe. Mara told him she had received his note. She said it mattered more than he knew. Logan nodded and said words were easier to write than to say. He looked around the diner like he was memorizing it. He said moments like these were rare and precious. They talked about simple things after that. About weather and roads and how people carried more than they showed. Logan said he admired how she stayed open in a guarded world. Mara said she admired how he carried responsibility without letting it harden him completely. Outside the night stretched wide and quiet. Logan finished his coffee and stood slowly. He told her he could not stay long and would be leaving again before sunrise. He said paths like his rarely slowed. Mara understood and did not ask him to stay. Before leaving, Logan reached into his jacket and placed the pin back into her hand. He told her it was never meant to bind her to his world. It was meant to remind her of her own strength. He said she did not need protection, only confidence in who she was. Mara closed her fingers around the pin and nodded. She watched Logan walk back into the darkness and mount his bike. The engine started low and steady, then faded into the distance. The diner felt quiet again, but not empty. She stood there for a long moment, breathing in the stillness. She realized that some people pass through life like chapters, not destinations. Logan was one of them. And though the road would keep pulling him away, the mark he left would stay with her. As the lights hummed softly above her, Mara returned to her work with a calm heart. She did not know what the future held. She only knew that compassion had connected two very different lives. And that connection had already changed her forever. The weeks after Logan's visit moved slowly for Mara, but they felt heavier than before. Life at the diner stayed the same on the surface, with coffee cups clinking and doors opening and closing. Yet inside her something kept shifting quietly. She carried the memory of Logan's calm strength like a steady light. Every choice she made felt more deliberate, as if kindness now had a deeper meaning. People in town began to notice small changes. Mara spoke with more confidence and held her ground when customers grew rude or impatient. She did not raise her voice or act harshly. She simply stayed firm and respectful. The pin Logan returned stayed hidden in her locker, but its presence lingered in her thoughts like a reminder of self-worth. One evening a stranger walked into the diner just before closing. He was nervous and looked over his shoulder more than once. He ordered coffee but barely touched it. Mara sensed unease and stayed nearby while wiping the counter. She noticed his hands shake slightly as he lifted the cup. The man finally admitted he was passing through town trying to start over. He spoke about mistakes and fear of being judged. Mara listened patiently and offered no advice, only understanding. She realized she had learned this from Logan. Strength did not always mean fixing problems. Sometimes it meant offering space. As the man left, he thanked her for treating him like a human. Mara watched him disappear into the night and felt a quiet certainty settle inside her. The world was full of unseen battles. Everyone needed moments of safety. Not long after, rumors returned to town again. People whispered about trouble on the highways and groups clashing far from home. Some customers grew tense whenever bikes passed by outside. Mara noticed fear rise quickly where understanding had little room. One afternoon, a group of bikers arrived unexpectedly. Their presence filled the diner with tension. Mara felt a flicker of worry but reminded herself of what she knew. She greeted them calmly and took their orders without hesitation. Her steady tone seemed to settle the room. One of the bikers asked her if she was all right. She nodded and said she was used to long nights and strange encounters. He smiled slightly and said Logan spoke highly of her. Hearing his name again made her heart tighten, but she kept her composure. The biker explained that Logan had been dealing with growing pressure within his world. Leadership meant constant balance between strength and restraint. Some challenges tested loyalty and patience. Logan held firm but the weight showed. Mara felt concern but also trust. She knew Logan chose his path fully aware of its demands. She asked the biker to tell Logan that the diner lights were always on for him. The biker nodded with respect and promised to pass along the message. That night Mara walked home under a clear sky filled with stars. She thought about how lives crossed briefly and left lasting marks. Logan's presence had changed how she saw herself. She no longer felt small or unseen. Days later a letter arrived at the diner addressed in careful handwriting. Mara recognized it immediately. Logan wrote about the road and the endless motion that defined his life. He wrote that leadership often required sacrifice and solitude. Yet he also wrote that knowing someone believed in his humanity made the burden lighter. He thanked her again not for help or protection, but for reminding him that compassion did not weaken authority. It strengthened it. He said the diner was a place of balance for him. A place where he could remember who he was before titles and expectations. Mara folded the letter neatly and placed it in her bag. She felt no urgency to respond. Some connections did not require constant words. They lived quietly in mutual respect. Time continued forward and seasons began to shift. The diner saw new faces and old ones returned. Mara grew more grounded with each passing week. She no longer feared the unknown as much as she once did. She trusted her ability to meet it calmly. One late night after closing she stood outside the diner watching the road stretch endlessly ahead. She realized she did not need to leave town to grow. Growth had already found her where she stood. In the distance she heard the low sound of a bike approaching. Her heart quickened, but she did not rush. The bike passed without stopping and continued down the highway. She smiled softly, understanding that not every moment required reunion. Mara turned off the diner lights and locked the door behind her. She felt steady and whole. Logan's path would always pull him onward, but the values they shared remained. Compassion, loyalty, and quiet strength. As she walked home she carried no fear, only clarity. Life did not promise safety or certainty. It promised moments that shaped who a person became. And she knew now that even the briefest connection could leave a permanent imprint. Somewhere far down the road Logan rode forward carrying his responsibilities with calm resolve. Somewhere in a small town a diner remained open as a place of warmth and humanity. Their lives moved separately yet remained quietly connected by respect and understanding. The final months of the year arrived quietly, and with them came change that felt gentle but deep for Mara. The diner remained her place of work, yet it no longer felt like a limit to her world. Every shift carried purpose and calm. She moved with confidence, greeting strangers without fear and listening without judgment. People often lingered longer at her counter, drawn by a feeling they could not name. The diner had become more than a stop on the road. One evening as winter air crept in through the door, a familiar sound rolled across the parking lot. A bike slowed and came to a stop outside under the pale glow of the diner lights. Mara felt it before she saw it, like a memory returning without warning. She stayed still for a moment, breathing slowly, then looked up. Logan stepped inside, removing his helmet with ease. Time had added lines to his face, but his presence was steady and grounded. He did not look burdened that night, only thoughtful. The room seemed to quiet naturally, as if recognizing him. Mara met his eyes and smiled without surprise. They spoke without rush, sitting across from each other with coffee between them. Logan said the road had taken him far and tested him deeply. He said leadership had demanded difficult choices and long nights. Yet he also said he felt clearer than before. He understood now that strength without compassion became empty. Mara shared how her life had changed in small ways. She spoke about confidence and trust in herself. She spoke about listening and standing firm when needed. Logan listened with respect, seeing how her growth mirrored his own journey in a different form. Two paths moving forward side by side without crossing too closely. Logan admitted that he would soon step back from his role. Not leave entirely, but allow others to carry more weight. He said every leader had a season, and his was shifting. Letting go was not weakness but wisdom. Mara nodded, understanding that change was not loss when it was chosen with clarity. The night passed gently, filled with quiet laughter and reflection. No promises were made, and none were needed. Their connection had matured into something steady and honest. It did not demand closeness or distance, only mutual respect. As dawn approached, Logan stood to leave. He thanked Mara one last time for the night she had offered kindness without knowing who he was. He said that moment had guided him more than any rule or order. It reminded him that humanity mattered above all else. Mara walked him to the door and watched as he mounted his bike. The engine started low and calm. Before riding away, Logan turned once more and gave a nod filled with gratitude and closure. Then he was gone, moving forward into his next chapter. Mara returned inside and began preparing for the day. The diner filled slowly with morning light and new faces. She felt no sadness, only completion. Some stories were not meant to continue endlessly. They existed to shape the people within them. In the months that followed, Mara took on more responsibility at the diner. She trained new workers and helped shape the space into one of warmth and fairness. She carried herself with quiet authority, earned through experience, not fear. Sometimes bikes still passed through town, and sometimes they stopped. Mara greeted them with the same calm respect she gave everyone else. She did not see jackets or titles, only people moving through their own journeys. On quiet nights she would stand by the window watching the road stretch out under the stars. She no longer wondered where it might take her. She knew that wherever she stood she carried purpose within herself. Far away, Logan continued his ride through open highways and changing landscapes. He carried fewer burdens, now trusting others to rise. He remembered a small diner and a woman who showed him that compassion could coexist with strength. Their lives moved on separate paths, yet the lesson remained shared. Kindness could change direction, even without intention. A single moment could ripple outward, touching futures unseen. The diner lights continued to glow against the dark road, welcoming those who needed rest. And in that steady light lived a story of quiet connection and lasting impact, shaped not by power but by humanity.